A sudden dizziness overwhelmed me. I clutched my head as nightmarish images flashed through my mind like a spinning lantern. One moment, I saw my brother, his bloodshot eyes staring at me. You have to be careful of him. The next, it was my parents, their lifeless faces frozen in horror. Don't trust Fiona Hart anymore. The memories crashed into me, battering my last shred of sanity. I squeezed my eyes shut, but the darkness wouldn't fade. The adulterous couple on the bed, tangled together, their figures blurring. Fiona's sickly sweet voice echoed in my ears. Your brother was still thinking about you when he died. Not like your parents. Bang. And they were gone. My vision burned, fury surging through me so intense it felt as if my tears would turn to blood. Brother, Mom, Dad, I finally see it now. I see Fiona Hart for who she truly is. But it's too late. Too late. Hey, what's wrong with you? Are you tired from walking? A hand lightly shook my shoulder, pulling me back to the present. A sharp, nasal voice grated against my ears. Fiona Hart. I was just about to lunge at her, to drag her down with me, when a mocking female voice cut through. Oh, stop acting all high and mighty, Sophie Reed. We've barely walked a few steps and you're already exhausted? What, are your legs made of tofu? I instinctively turned my head, and froze. The woman speaking was Lucy Young. But, wasn't she supposed to be dead? She died 2 years ago. My heart pounded wildly. I glanced around, taking in my surroundings. A boutique near our university. I recognized it immediately. This place stood out in my memory because I had countless arguments here, trading insults with customers. And the one I had the most conflicts with? Lucy Young, the sales associate. I stared at her in disbelief before shifting my gaze back to Fiona. That's when I noticed. She looked younger than I remembered. The perfectly maintained, elegant face from my memories was gone. Instead, she wore a faded, cheap t-shirt, her hair tied into 2 limp braids hanging behind her back. She looked utterly plain, nothing like the refined, poised woman she would become in just a few years. I was still reeling when Fiona spoke in a soft, coaxing voice. Lucy, you can't expect everyone to be as tough as you. Sophie is a pampered young lady, always chauffeured everywhere. Unlike us, she's never had to walk long distances. It's understandable that she's a bit delicate. Lucy scoffed, her gaze filled with even more disdain. So damn fragile. At that moment, I finally understood. I had been reborn. I was back in my freshman year, the year Fiona Hart became my roommate, the year my nightmare began. From this point on, she would carefully craft her image, bright, hardworking, inspiring, slowly becoming the campus goddess that everyone adored. I, her so-called best friend, would introduce her to my brother, paving the way for her. And I, the fool, would be nothing more than a stepping stone for her, used to boost her status. When I was no longer useful, she would plot against me, ensuring the deaths of my family. In the end, she would take everything, every last cent of my inheritance. Now in front of me, Fiona held up 2 dresses, one in each hand. One arm was still lightly supporting me, her expression a mix of concern and guilt. I'm so sorry. I was too focused on picking out clothes for you that I didn't realize you were tired. Why don't we head back first? I glanced at the dresses, neither of which were my size. Suppressing the wave of hatred surging inside me, I forced a smile. Sure. Let's check out then. Fiona clearly assumed I would pay, just like before. She held the 2 dresses against me, tilting her head in a thoughtful pose. The light blue one makes you look fairer, but the black one is slimming. Which do you like better? She batted her eyes at me expectantly. Or maybe. Why don't you just buy both? I lowered my gaze, masking the cold, calculating hatred in my eyes. In my past life, I was stupid enough to fall for your tricks. But this time, it's going to be different. Hearing my response, Fiona's breath hitched for a split second before she quickly composed herself, flashing a bright smile. All right, let's get both. She handed both dresses to Lucy Young. Lucy didn't even bother asking. She just swiftly snipped off the tags, rolling her eyes at me. Then, she exchanged a look with her coworker that practically screamed, "Look at this dumb rich girl getting scammed." Her fingers tapped briskly on the register. "That'll be $19,800. You can scan the QR code here." Fiona leisurely sank into the store's plush sofa, admiring her freshly done nails. Not even the slightest intention of paying. I smiled. Really, it was my own fault for spoiling this greedy little snake. My family had been wealthy for generations. Most of my friends came from affluent backgrounds. When we exchanged gifts, we never cared about the price. It was all about the sentiment. That's why, when Fiona Hart traded a grasshopper she hand-wove for a designer handbag worth thousands, I didn't think anything of it. That grasshopper was still carefully stored in a Tiffany crystal box, placed in the most prominent spot on my bookshelf. Fiona must have cursed me as a fool every time she saw it. I couldn't be bothered to keep up the charade any longer. Tossing out a casual, "I need to take a call," I got up and walked out, flagged down a rideshare, and left without looking back. Without me footing the bill, that $19,800 was bound to cause a spectacle between Fiona and Lucy Young. I could already imagine the drama unfolding in the store. Back at school, the first thing I did was find our student advisor, Lisa Evans, to request a dorm transfer. Lisa, having come from a modest background herself, instinctively spoke up for Fiona. "The school has rules. Dorm changes aren't allowed without special circumstances. Sophie, you should try to be more understanding when living with others. I know you and Fiona come from different backgrounds, but that's all the more reason to get along. After all, you're classmates. It's a rare fate to be roommates." I had expected her to say this. Putting on an aggrieved yet reluctant to speak expression, I murmured, "I do have a valid reason for needing to transfer, but it's just hard to talk about." My vague response left plenty of room for speculation. Lisa was about to probe further when a loud commotion erupted from outside. The next second, the office door was kicked open with a bang. A sharp, aggressive voice rang out. "Sophie Reed, give me back my money." Well, Lucy Young had actually stormed onto campus. That $19,800 must have really hit a nerve. I smirked. Perfect timing. I had been wondering who could help me expose Fiona Hart's manipulative tricks. With Lucy here, she'd do half the job for me. Lucy charged in like a storm, followed closely by a dozen curious students eager to watch the drama unfold. She marched straight up to Lisa's desk, slamming the two dresses onto the surface, completely ignoring Lisa's darkening expression. Puffing out her chest, she demanded, "Professor, can you do something about your students? I'm just a working girl selling clothes, but today, this one," she jabbed a finger at my face, "came to our store, tried on clothes, had me running around serving her all afternoon, finally picked out 2 pieces, and then just walked out without paying. I already cut the tags. Who's gonna cover the loss? That's $19,800. As her words landed, Lisa's gaze flicked toward me, filled with doubt. Meanwhile, whispers spread through the gathered students. Didn't they say Sophie Reed's family was rich? Why would she stiff a store worker on a bill? Maybe she just looks down on people from lower backgrounds. The situation was too familiar. Lucy Young, with her aggressive, unreasonable attitude and her ability to twist the truth, had been the bane of my existence in my past life. I was hot-tempered and could never back down from an argument, always trying to reason my way to victory. But Lucy didn't care about reason. She knew exactly how to push my buttons. Back then, I had countless public fights with her, each one damaging my reputation. By the time I graduated, whenever people mentioned me, Sophie Reed, they'd shake their heads and say, "That spoiled brat," always making a scene. But this time, I wasn't going to fall for it. I smiled and turned to Lucy, my expression pure and innocent. "You must be mistaken. I didn't buy any clothes today. My friend did. Why are you coming to me for money?" Lucy sneered. "Bullshit. You were the one who wanted them. You've shopped at our store plenty of times before. I have the records. Oh, so rich people think they can just play us common folks like fools?" She threw down her ultimatum. "No more nonsense. Pay up, or we're going straight to the police station." Lisa's expression darkened further as she realized the situation was spiraling. She turned to me with a look of warning. "Sophie, I know you're not someone who would deliberately skip out on a bill. If there's a misunderstanding, it's best to clear it up now before things get out of hand. You wouldn't want this to damage your reputation or the school's." Her meaning was clear. Just pay up and move on. Eyes were on me from all directions, waiting to see what I'd do next. I glanced at the familiar figure, hiding behind the crowd, and let out a silent laugh. "Fiona Hart, you have no idea what you're about to lose after today." I didn't bother explaining. Instead, I picked up the dresses from the desk and tried to put them on over my clothes. The tight-fitting t-shirt I was wearing made it a little difficult, but even so, anyone with eyes could see that my body shape was completely incompatible with these size S dresses. The room fell into silence. Then I let out a cold laugh. You really think you can pull this off? Do you even have a brain? I strode up to Lucy Young, towering over her. Let's not even talk about how these cheap, third-rate clothes don't meet my standards. Even if your store sold high-end luxury brands, as long as it had a salesperson like you, everything in there would still be trash to me. I leaned in slightly, raising an eyebrow. Now tell me, who exactly is skipping out on the bill here? I threatened calmly. If you can't explain properly, we'll just go to your store and check the surveillance footage. And after that, I'll sue you for defamation. Don't worry, I have all the time in the world to deal with you. Lucy Young clearly hadn't expected this reaction from me. She stood frozen, caught off guard. In all our past encounters, she had always assumed I was just another clueless rich airhead, someone she could manipulate with a few words and make me willingly hand over my money. But anyone who had suffered the way I did in my past life could never remain the same naive fool. Her eyes darted away, her confidence shaken, but she still tried to hold her ground. Fine, maybe you weren't the one who said you were buying the dresses. But wasn't it your friend? If she doesn't have the money, of course, I'd come to you. Didn't you always pay for her before? Why not this time? The crowd erupted into murmurs. What kind of logic is that? That's basically extortion. So if I take my friend to buy a house and they can't pay, the developer should just come after me instead? Damn, I almost misunderstood Sophie Reed. But seriously, who's this so-called friend? That's some next-level shamelessness. At this point, Fiona Hart could no longer stay hidden. She quickly pushed through the crowd, stepping forward. I picked the dresses for Sophie, she said, her voice trembling, as if on the verge of tears. Then, as if trying to defuse the situation, she added, Please, stop arguing. This is all my fault. I'll pay for it. I'll work part-time and save up as soon as I can. Just don't make things difficult for Sophie anymore. She was careful with her words, subtly blurring the truth, intentionally avoiding the real issue of who these dresses were actually for. She made it sound like the dresses were meant for me, implying that, logically, I should be the one paying for them. Most people naturally sympathize with the weak. If I let her keep twisting the story, not only would she escape unscathed, but she'd also come out looking like a selfless and loyal friend. Meanwhile, all the blame would land on me. Just like in my past life, where I was constantly painted as arrogant, spoiled, and unreasonable, a reputation I could never shake off. But this time, I wouldn't be her stepping stone. As confusion spread among the onlookers, I let out a small sigh and turned to Lisa Evans. Professor, do you understand now why I requested a dorm transfer? Lisa looked puzzled, clearly not following my sudden shift in conversation. The other students were equally baffled, wondering why I had suddenly changed the subject. I didn't leave them hanging. I spoke directly. She said she picked these dresses for me, but she deliberately chose her own size. And in the end, I was still expected to pay. Fiona, be honest with yourself. Of all the dresses I've ever paid for, who actually wore them in the end? I met her gaze head-on and continued, my voice calm but sharp. The clothes, shoes, and bags you've bought under my name, how much do they add up to now? 6 figures at least. I let the weight of my words settle in. Back then, I considered you a friend. I knew your family situation wasn't great, so I didn't mind when you pulled little tricks like this. It was just money after all. I'm willing to spend money on my friends. But did you ever really see me as a friend? You spent my money freely. But how did you describe me to others? Your close friend, Rachel Lowe, constantly went around saying that I looked down on people, that I flaunted my wealth, that giving you things was an insult to you. Outwardly, you defended me, but behind my back, you fanned the flames, didn't you? Tell me, Fiona, if you hadn't silently agreed with her, would she have dared to speak with such confidence? In my past life, Fiona Hart used my money to dress herself up like a privileged heiress, while still maintaining her rags-to-riches narrative. She constantly implied to others that the clothes and accessories she wore were just my cast-offs, painting herself as a pure, untainted lotus rising from the mud. She knew exactly how to market herself. The intelligent ones weren't as pretty as her, and the pretty ones weren't as hardworking as her. So despite being unremarkable in actual ability, she won the school's Outstanding Student Award every year, padding her resume with glowing accolades. But now, as I peeled back the layers of her carefully constructed image, exposing the rotten truth beneath, her face turned paler and paler. Damn, Fiona is ruthless. I can't believe I actually voted for her to be next week's alumni event host. If people find out that our school's representative is just a two-faced schemer, we'd be a laughingstock. That alumni event. In my past life, Fiona Hart had shone brilliantly as the host of that very event. That was when she first transformed from an ordinary small-town girl into a widely admired, untouchable goddess. Among her admirers was my fiancé, Zachary Coleman. That vile man. He loved Fiona all along, yet for the sake of his ambitions, he got engaged to me. He didn't just sabotage me at every turn, he even slowly poisoned me, destroying my health over time. Later, when the Song Corporation was on the brink of collapse, I took the finalized partnership proposal to beg Zachary for help. And where was he? Busy in bed with Fiona Hart. At that time, my brother and parents had already been reduced to nothing but cold, unburied corpses. I waited outside their room for an entire hour, until they were finally satisfied, before I was allowed to approach. That partnership proposal had taken 2 weeks of non-stop work from my entire company to perfect, and yet, with just a few words from Fiona, Zachary ripped it into shreds. The humiliation of my past life still burned in my bones. My nails dug into my palms as I clenched my fists. This time I will make them pay. Every last one of them. "Professor, may I transfer dorms now?" I asked flatly. Lisa Evans glanced at Fiona, whose guilty expression said it all. With a resigned sigh, she nodded. "All right, I'll make the arrangements as soon as possible." With my goal achieved, I exchanged a few polite words before leaving the office. Fiona Hart was still too young. She hadn't yet mastered the art of adapting like a snake, as she had in my past life. The moment I flipped the script on her, she had no way to fight back. She wasn't yet the cunning actress who could weave lies so seamlessly that she never lost control of the situation. But I had no interest in showing mercy. In my eyes, striking while the enemy was weak was the greatest virtue. As I walked back to my dorm, my mind wandered to the upcoming alumni event. I was so deep in thought that I didn't notice a hand suddenly reaching out from the side, almost smacking me in the face. Lucy Young blocked my path, standing there with her arms crossed, exuding the aura of a street thug. "Sophie Reed, let's talk," she smirked, her voice dripping with arrogance. "I know you've got money. A few $1,000s is nothing to you. Why don't you be generous and just cover the cost? It's not like it even matters to you. Think of it as buying a friend. What do you say?" I stared at her, speechless. It was like hearing the setup to a bad joke. She's throwing herself into the fire? Well then, I'll gladly oblige. Without a word, I pulled out my phone and started tapping away. Lucy frowned, confused. "What are you doing?" I curved my lips into a smirk. "Filing a complaint against you." She blinked, then suddenly burst into laughter, doubling over like she had just heard the funniest thing in the world. "Are you serious? You've complained about me before. Did it ever work? Let me tell you something. I'm the top salesperson at my store. Even the manager wouldn't dare touch me. You think a complaint will do anything? Please." She wasn't wrong. I really had been a fool in my past life. I wasted so much energy arguing with Lucy Young, while Fiona Hart quietly reaped the rewards. Every time I clashed with Lucy, Fiona would stand by my side, pretending to support me, all while gaining sympathy and boosting her own status. And every single time, I fell for it. I carried several shopping bags in my hands while Lucy Young stood there smugly. Her manager might have scolded her on the surface, but behind closed doors, he was probably giving her a thumbs up. But this time, I was smarter. A rich girl had her own way of handling things. Instead of wasting time on trivial fights, why not go straight for the root cause? I smiled lightly. "You might want to hold off on celebrating. Be careful, or you'll end up slapping yourself in the face." Seeing my calm and unaffected demeanor, Lucy couldn't hold back and cursed. "What's with the attitude? You're just some spoiled brat with money. Who the hell do you think you're trying to impress?" In my mind, I counted down. 3, 2, 1, ring, ring. Lucy's phone went off. She shot me a mocking glance before answering, deliberately putting the call on speaker so I could hear. Hey boss, what's up? Her tone was overly familiar, clearly trying to show off, but the next second, bookmark. Lucy Young, what the hell did you do? You screwed me over, do you even realize that? Where the hell are you? Get your ass back to the store now. Lucy's smirk froze. Wait, what happened, boss? Hello? Before she could get an answer, the call ended with a sharp beep. It took her a long moment to process what had just happened. Then, in a panic, she rushed after me. Sophie Reed, stop right there. What the hell did you do? I turned slightly and gave her a slow, wicked smile. Take a guess. For the first time, her arrogant mask shattered completely. There were countless ways to destroy someone. No need to get my hands dirty over a small-time store clerk. Wrecking a little boutique was as easy as snapping my fingers. All I had to do was give a simple instruction to the Song Corporation's secretary. He would naturally find the best way to handle the problem efficiently and effectively. As I watched Lucy Young run off in a flurry, I suddenly remembered something from my past life. At some point, Lucy and Fiona Hart had a falling out over an unknown issue. Lucy had even threatened to expose Fiona's scandals. But before she could act, she was brutally murdered by debt collectors, hacked to death in the middle of the night. At that time, I was still blindly loyal to Fiona, thinking of her as my best friend. When I heard the news, I had actually clapped my hands in joy, saying, serves her right. Looking back now, it all felt far too convenient. Was it really just a coincidence? I highly doubted it. Fiona Hart had always been calculating. What exactly had Lucy Young known that made her a threat? What leverage did she have over Fiona that made her worth eliminating? I thought for a moment, then pulled out my phone. Uncle Lou, I need you to look into something for me. Maybe this time, Lucy Young could be more useful alive than dead. Back at the dorm, I packed up my belongings in record time. Then, without hesitation, I contacted a real estate agent and rented a fully furnished apartment off campus. As for the rest of my stuff in the dorm, I hired a moving company to take everything, down to the last bottle of body wash. Even the clothes, shoes, and bags I had previously bought for Fiona Hart were taken away. As expected, the moment my things were gone, Fiona called me. She cried bitterly over the phone, claiming I had misunderstood her, that the whole situation was breaking her heart. I could only imagine how miserable she must be without me as her personal ATM. Without a second thought, I blocked her number. Meanwhile, my fallout with Fiona had exploded on the campus forum. Some people took my side, saying I had been exploited for years, calling Fiona a gold-digging leech. Sophie was so naive and kind, but that snake Fiona completely drained her dry. Damn! Fiona Hart is the reincarnation of a money-sucking parasite. But as always, there were those who refused to believe it. Come on, there's no way Fiona is that bad. She's been an outstanding student every year. We don't know the full story, no need to jump to conclusions. And then there was this. If Fiona Hart was really that selfish and manipulative, why would the school still select her as a representative for next week's alumni event? I frowned and pulled up the event's official website. Scrolling through the list of school representatives, I spotted her name. Lisa Evans had always been biased toward Fiona. I had expected that. But for her to blatantly push Fiona into the spotlight at such a critical moment? That was outright provocation. Fine. If they wanted to challenge me, I would be more than happy to play along. On the day of the alumni event, my brother, as one of the distinguished graduates, returned to campus. The moment I saw him, a sharp sting pricked my nose, and I almost burst into tears. Brother, I opened my mouth, but my throat felt like it was weighed down by a massive boulder, hoarse and strained. Hearing my voice, my brother, Ethan Song, turned his head. His eyes were filled with warmth and indulgence. Come here, let me see if you've lost weight. I swallowed back the overwhelming urge to cry and threw myself into his arms. Ethan, I missed you so much. I miss Mom and Dad. I just want to go home. Ethan's expression flickered with a trace of surprise before turning serious. What's wrong? Did something happen at school? Did someone bully you? I was about to shake my head when, out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of Zachary Coleman, who had also come for the alumni event. Instantly, I changed my mind. I blinked up at Ethan, my eyes misty with tears. I was bullied so badly. I want to cancel my engagement to Zachary Coleman. His brows furrowed deeply. I took the chance to add fuel to the fire. Zachary doesn't love me. Not only does he ignore me most of the time, but he also flirts with my green tea roommate right in front of me, as if I'm invisible. At this point in time, Zachary hadn't officially met Fiona Hart yet, but I had an unshakable instinct. Sooner or later, the two of them would end up just like in my past life. After all, back then, it had taken Zachary mere seconds to fall for her. Ethan's face darkened. The roommate you're talking about. It's Fiona Hart? That's right. I watched his expression closely, only relaxing when I saw nothing but pure disgust in his eyes. In my past life, Fiona had fallen in love with my brother at first sight. She chased after him for 7 years. Eventually, under my relentless matchmaking and the pressure from our parents, they got married. But after the wedding, she accused Ethan of domestic abuse, claiming she suffered a miscarriage because of him. I had refused to believe it at first. How could my gentle, refined brother suddenly become a violent drunk? But the bruises covering Fiona's body were undeniable. The hospital's miscarriage report was even more so. I was furious and guilt-ridden, standing by her side when she filed for divorce. I even resorted to emotional blackmail, threatening to hurt myself if Ethan didn't agree, just to make sure Fiona was satisfied. To this day, I still grieved for the unborn child that never had a chance. Thinking back, I must have been possessed. How could I have doubted the brother who had been by my side for over 20 years just because of Fiona's words? Later, I learned the truth. The injuries on her body? Fake. The miscarriage? A lie. That child wasn't even my brother's, it was Zachary Coleman's bastard. Fiona had never intended to keep the baby. For her, it was just another calculated move. She used the miscarriage story to get rid of a potential scandal, framed my brother for domestic violence, and gained sympathy while scheming for the family's wealth. And as a final twist, she manipulated Zachary into feeling so guilty that he devoted himself to her completely. The truth was, Fiona never truly loved either of them. She only loved the thrill of control, the satisfaction of making everyone bow at her feet. In the end, she had Ethan lured into a trap. He received a call claiming she had been kidnapped and that he needed to bring the ransom alone. I begged him not to go, even threatened to end my own life if he did. But he still went. And then, Fiona walked out unscathed. My brother, however, was beaten to death. When my parents rushed to the scene upon hearing the news, they got into a sudden car accident. Both of them died on impact. Strangely, the driver who had been with them only suffered a broken leg. As for me, I was already beyond saving. Zachary had always been obsessed with delicate women, and under Fiona's influence, he convinced me to take weight loss pills she provided. Those pills were nothing but slow poison. My body had already rotted from the inside out. Death was just a matter of time. And that was how the Song family was systematically destroyed by Fiona Hart. Lost in my memories, I clenched my icy fingers into a fist. Suddenly, a pair of warm, steady hands wrapped around mine. Sophie, anything that can be taken away so easily was never important to begin with. Ethan's voice was calm, but there was a sharp edge to it. As for the people who don't deserve you, your brother will take care of them. As he spoke, he cast a cold glance towards something in the distance. I followed his gaze and saw Zachary Coleman, standing just a few meters away, fatefully crossing paths with Fiona Hart. Even though this time, Fiona wasn't the dazzling event host, nor was she dressed in expensive designer clothes. She had no high-end makeup artist working on her face. Blended into a crowd of girls, she was completely unremarkable. And yet, Zachary still noticed her instantly, as if something deep within him had awakened, recognizing her from another life. Back then, Zachary had always been a cold, serious man. Around me, he carried himself with an air of maturity and restraint. But now, unlike his usual composed demeanor, Zachary Coleman's lips curved up ever so slightly as he looked at Fiona Hart. His eyes burned with a barely restrained passion, like a clueless young man experiencing love for the first time. He leaned in and whispered something in her ear, making her cheeks flush red as she laughed sweetly. The two seemed to hit it off immediately, so much so that they didn't even notice Ethan and me standing there. Just like that, they walked past us without a single glance. Ethan's gaze darkened as he stared at Zachary's retreating figure. Meanwhile, I merely smiled. The show has finally begun. The alumni event, focused on career development and resource sharing, stretched on for most of the day. During the intermission, Fiona suddenly approached me with a bottle of mineral water, her eyes curved into a smile. "Sophie, the drinks in the conference hall are running out. I saved this one just for you. Here, take it." Around us, students slowed their steps, obviously curious to see how things would unfold between the two main characters of the recent campus scandal. Fiona's move was brilliant, classic retreat to advanced strategy. She assumed I was still soft-hearted and easy to manipulate. By publicly acting as if we were still close friends, she hoped to coax me into letting bygones be bygones. That way, she could continue using me as her personal cash cow. And if I refused to play along, it didn't matter. She could still act pitiful. Given my temper, any public argument would only make me look like the aggressor, while she would gain sympathy. If she repeated this performance a few more times, she might even erase the damage from her previous scandals altogether. Too bad she miscalculated. I was no longer the naive fool she could mold at will. I had crawled out of hell itself. I looked at her, amused. "You don't actually think pretending nothing happened will make me your fool again, do you?" Fiona stiffened, her expression faltering for the first time. "Sophie, must you say such hurtful things?" I sneered. "If my words hurt you, don't question my manners, just know I did it on purpose." With that, I turned to leave, but before I could take a step, someone grabbed my arm. "Apologize." Zachary Coleman's cold voice rang out as he stared at me disapprovingly. I scoffed, shaking off his hand. "And if I don't?" His gaze darkened. "Then I'll have to reconsider our relationship. The future mistress of the Coleman family should at least have some basic decency." I caught the flicker in Fiona's eyes. With her intelligence, she had already deduced that anyone engaged to me had to be from a wealthy or powerful background. And with her sharp instincts, she could clearly sense Zachary's undisguised interest in her. Given her greedy nature, she would never let go of such a high-quality backup plan. I smirked. "Oh, how heroic. You two are such a perfect match. So tell me, how long have you been sneaking around behind my back?" The watching students gasped in shock. Fiona's face drained of color. "Sophie, stop making things up. Zachary and I just met today." I let out a sarcastic chuckle. "Oh, then why don't you swear on it? Say that you've never once had any thoughts about Zachary Coleman, and that you'll never have anything to do with him in the future. Otherwise, may you break out in sores from head to toe, suffer uncontrollable bodily functions, and die the most miserable death imaginable." Fiona was deeply superstitious. She hesitated for only a second before pretending not to hear me. She lowered her head pitifully. "Sophie, you've really misunderstood me." From the crowd, someone snickered. "Ah, classic green tea move, playing the victim." Fiona's face flushed red and white with embarrassment. "That's enough," Zachary said grimly. "Sophie, you should think before you speak. I'm not someone you can joke about so casually. Be careful not to take things too far." "Do I look like I'm joking?" I stared Zachary Coleman down, my voice laced with amusement. "You act like I should be grateful to have you, like you're some rare prize. Maybe take a good look in the mirror and ask yourself if you're even worth it." The crowd erupted into laughter. Zachary's face darkened instantly, his expression stormy. He had likely never been humiliated like this before in his entire life. Jaw clenched, he spat out through gritted teeth. "Unbelievable." Then, without another word, he turned on his heel and walked away. "Zachary, don't be mad," Fiona called after him sweetly, quickly chasing after him. "She's just blunt sometimes." Before leaving, she shot me a glance, filled with mockery, as if she was already relishing her victory. I nearly laughed out loud. "Fiona, you have no idea that today marks the end of your good days." As the alumni event neared its conclusion, the large screen began playing a montage celebrating the university's history and achievements. The host spoke passionately about the school's legacy. Suddenly, the screen flickered, and then an entirely different video began playing. The footage was gripping, immediately drawing the full attention of the audience. A collective gasp and a few startled screams filled the hall as a disheveled high school girl was dragged into the frame by her hair. In the video, the girl was pinned to the ground by a group of rough-looking girls, unable to move, sobbing in pain. Fiona, I swear it was an accident. I didn't mean to score higher than you on the test. The camera panned, revealing a painfully familiar face. Fiona Hart. Expressionless, she casually chewed on a piece of gum before pressing it down onto the girl's hair. Her lips curled into a smirk. No worries, I just need to teach you a little lesson so you won't do it again. The girl trembled in terror. No, please, slap. A sharp slap echoed through the speakers. Tears streamed down the victim's face as she sobbed. I'm sorry. I swear I won't do it again. But Fiona wasn't finished. She glanced at her followers and signaled with a nod. Each of you take turns slapping her. Don't stop until I'm satisfied. The hall fell silent as the relentless sound of slaps filled the room, mingled with agonized cries and cruel laughter. The video ended. For a long moment the auditorium was deathly quiet. Then, hushed whispers began to spread like wildfire. That was Fiona Hart, wasn't it? Yeah. She was a freshman in high school back then. I can't believe it. She always seemed so kind and refined. More and more eyes turned toward Fiona, their gazes filled with shock and disgust. Standing at the front of the hall, Fiona was as pale as a sheet, trembling like a fragile leaf caught in a storm. I smiled soundlessly. Fiona, when you enjoyed bullying others without restraint, did it ever cross your mind that one day your past sins would come back to stab you in the heart? The bullying scandal shook the entire university and spread online like wildfire. Furious netizens demanded justice. Anyone who dares to treat my kid like this is getting a visit from me, in hell. She should be in jail, not a prestigious university. The school acted swiftly, issuing an official disciplinary notice against Fiona Hart and publicly stating that they had zero tolerance for bullying. Lisa Evans, who had helped plan the alumni event, was also reprimanded by the administration for her oversight. As the scandal continued to escalate, more people came forward, exposing Fiona's past misdeeds, ostracizing classmates, spreading malicious rumors, leading a promiscuous lifestyle. The controversy surged to new heights, cementing her downfall. The once admired inspirational goddess had now become a public disgrace. Fiona had lived her life basking in admiration, always enjoying the smoothest of sailing. But now, faced with this immense backlash, she couldn't handle the sudden reversal. She locked herself in her dorm room, using a fake account to argue with netizens day and night. Her eyes became bloodshot, her hair fell out in clumps, and within just a few days, she was teetering on the edge of a breakdown. She was consumed with hatred for whoever had exposed the video. In her desperation, she reported the matter to the police, pointing the finger at Lucy Young. It was her. She filmed the video back then. She's a gambling addict. I refused to lend her money before, so she's doing this to get revenge. She invaded my privacy. I demand the police punish her for this. Even the officers handling the case looked at her with thinly veiled disdain, but they still followed protocol and investigated the complaint. Too bad for Fiona. I was the one who had obtained the footage, and I had hired a professional hacker to do it. In the end, there was no real evidence connecting Lucy Young to the video leak, so the case was quietly dropped. Fiona Hart was absolutely furious, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't get in touch with Lucy. And just when she was at the peak of her rage, I anonymously sent her Lucy Young's current address. That very night, in a slum scheduled for demolition, a violent assault took place. A female college student attacked another young woman with a knife, slashing her face. The victim, Song Yi, had to get 7 stitches. Her face was permanently scarred, her disfigurement was inevitable. And the attacker? None other than the infamous bully herself, Fiona Hart. The moment the news broke, the university acted swiftly, officially expelling Fiona. She was arrested shortly after and sentenced to 2 years in prison. As if by fate, when she was released 2 years later, she still ended up with Zachary Coleman, only this time as his secret mistress. Over those 2 years, the Coleman family had been steadily declining under the unseen pressure from the Song Corporation. Their financial situation was already on the brink of collapse, barely maintaining the illusion of wealth on the surface. The next time I saw Fiona, it was in a luxury boutique. She hadn't changed much in appearance, but her eyes were darker, filled with shadows of bitterness. When she recognized me, she stared for a long moment before suddenly sneering maliciously. "Sophie Reed, do you know what kind of relationship Zachary and I have?" I raised an eyebrow. "A mutually destructive one?" Fiona took a deep breath, then smirked coldly as she lifted the black card in her hand. "This was a gift from Zachary. Sophie, I actually pity you. Your fiancé clearly doesn't love you." I chuckled. "There's something you don't know. My family has been planning to break off the engagement with the Colemans for a while now. We were simply waiting for a legitimate reason. So really, I should be thanking you for handing yourself over as the perfect excuse." Fiona's smirk faltered as she processed my words. The realization dawned on her and her face turned pale. Leaning in close to her ear, I whispered, "How does it feel to be on the receiving end of domestic violence?" Her eyes widened in disbelief. You knew?" I patted her shoulder with a mocking smile. "You should start thinking about what will happen to you once I officially break off my engagement with Zachary." Her pupils shrank in terror, her body trembling. Just as I had predicted, 6 months later, the Coleman family went completely bankrupt. Zachary blamed Fiona for everything, blamed her for his failures, for losing the Song family alliance, for the collapse of his once promising future. He beat her ruthlessly, leaving her covered in bruises, her body black and blue. Over that half-year, Fiona suffered 2 miscarriages. Her body deteriorated rapidly. At first, she had tried to escape, but after losing everything, Zachary had turned to alcohol. During one of his drunken rages, he broke her leg. From then on, she stopped trying to run. Maybe she had been beaten into submission. Maybe she had simply lost the will to fight. And what about Lucy Young? She had always been a gambler, drowning in debt. After losing her job, even her phone was seized by loan sharks as collateral. She had no idea that Fiona had been completely ruined online because of the bullying scandal. One day, Lucy had planned to blackmail Fiona for some money. She never expected Fiona to come looking for her first. The two of them misunderstood each other completely. Lucy had no idea what Fiona was talking about. But before she could react, Fiona slashed her across the face with a knife, cutting so deep that the wound exposed bone. Lucy was left permanently disfigured. Fiona went to prison. And with no way to take revenge on Fiona directly, Lucy turned her anger toward Fiona's elderly parents back in their hometown. She harassed them so relentlessly that they lost their jobs and became outcasts in their community, unable to show their faces in public. But the most unexpected twist of all, Ethan Song, my dear brother, finally fell in love at the age of 32. His partner was a top-tier specialist he had personally poached from another company. Both of them were notorious workaholics, but the moment they met, it was like a fire had been lit. Their relationship progressed at lightning speed. They married within the year, and before I knew it, I had a chubby little nephew to spoil. My parents were so overjoyed that they retired early just to help take care of their grandchild. And me? I was doing great. Busy, but happy. I took on an active role at the Song Corporation while also learning tailoring, baking, gardening, rock climbing, skiing, diving, and surfing. I threw myself into every exciting new experience I could find. There were too many regrets in life, too many stories that never got the ending they deserved. Life was fleeting, and tomorrow wasn't guaranteed. With this second chance, while the sun still shined on me, I was going to live.